Welcome everyone. In this video, let's look into our day 5 of the professional course. This day 5 course is divided into 8 different sections. In that, we'll be looking into section 3, which is your render settings. See, in our previous section, we talked in detail about 3 of the 4 elements of your real-time rendering, right? Where element 1 being your lighting, 2 being your environment setting, 3 being the material. And this session, we'll be talking about your 4th element, which is your render settings. And here, when it comes to render settings within your real-time rendering, there are 3 important tabs here. On the right, can you see you have something called environmental tab, camera tab, effects tab. All this cumulatively contributes to your render settings. In that, now let's just look into your first tab, which is your environmental tab. See, environmental tab will contain some important settings that will help you to manipulate the environment, the outdoor and the indoor environment. In this, you might notice there are many settings here. Of all this, just focus on the settings which we are addressing in today's sessions, because those are all the designer settings which will create a drastic impact in your environment. In that, the first setting here is your horizontal rotation, which will help you to rotate the HDR image. See, right now if you notice outside, can you see we've added an HDR image, right? If you want to move or rotate this HDRI, you could use this to rotate it. Can you see here? You could manually rotate it using this, or you can precisely type in the rotation angle too. This is what your first environmental setting, which is your horizontal rotation. And the second important setting here is your ambient brightness, which will help you to control the brightness of your indoor ambience. So here, if you notice, the space is amply lit, so I don't have to worry about this parameter in this scenario. But in certain cases, you might notice that the entire scene or a space might be a bit dark. In those scenarios, you could either add your rectangular ambient lighting from the lighting tab, and you can make it bright, or if you want to quickly make it bright, you could also do it using the ambient brightness. So here right now, can you see, if I increase it up, this will increase the overall brightness of the space. Can you see here? Or if you want to make it easy, here itself, can you see you have your indoor template and outdoor template, right? You could also select it based on which the ambient brightness will quickly be controlled. Always remember, this ambient brightness setting will only create an impact if that space has an opening through which the natural lighting is getting in. If there isn't any opening in that specific room or a space, then controlling this ambient brightness is of no use. So this is what your second important parameter, which is your ambient brightness. The third important environmental setting is your tone. This helps you to control the visual tone of the environment. So in default, it will be neutral. If you want, you can make it warmer. Can you see the ambience will naturally tend to be in a bit more warmer tone, or if you want, you can make it cooler too. My personal recommendation is to either set it as natural or warmer. Apart from this, the fourth important environmental setting is the color temperature. This talks about the color temperature of your sun. In default, it will be neutral white, but if you want, you can make it warmer or cooler. This I would recommend you to control depending on the time of the render. For example, if you're planning to take a render in the early morning or sunset kind of an ambience, in those cases, then sun will naturally be of a warmer tone, right? So then you can set it as a warmer. If you see the same sun almost about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the evening, it will be almost at the cooler kind of a tone, right? In those scenarios, you can just make it as cooler. So depending on the time of the render you're preferring, you can precisely control the color temperature based on which the ambience will be controlled. This is your fourth important environmental setting. The fifth important environmental setting is your shadow softness. This talks about the softness of the shadow. You would have already talked about your shadow softness in your spotlight. And during the time I would have told you that spotlight and sunlight only has the capability to create a sharp or an harsh shadow, right? So you have a feasibility here to control the softness of the shadow. You could follow the same recommendation which was provided there. It is better that to keep it at the center so the shadows will be neutral. Or if you want, you can reduce it and make it almost midway between the center and the shaft. Okay, only in some rare occasions you might set it as soft shadow, but this is completely preference based. And then comes the next important environmental setting is the brightness. Brightness talks about the brightness of your sun. So if you increase it up, your sun brightness will increase. If you decrease it up, your sun brightness will decrease. Right now, the brightness of the sun is 50 units. You could control it according to your preference. And the last important, and apart from your brightness, the last important environmental settings are your azimuth or your angle. So azimuth is nothing but your sun position. So if you go to your plan view in the real-time rendering window, you would have already talked about your sun and its position, right? And if you want to control the direction of the sun, you could do this. Okay, this is exactly what this azimuth position here is. using which you could define the direction of the sun. And like I addressed in your previous session, it is always better that your sun is aligned in a way that it is in line with your opening for that space. And apart from your azimuth position, you even have your vertical angle too. This talks about the height of the sun, especially if you're taking an early morning or a sunset shot for your renders, then the sun will be at the lower altitude, right? So you could go for maybe about 30 or 35 or 40 degree. If you're taking some kind of a midday kind of a shot, something like an afternoon kind of a scene for your interior or so, in those cases, then the sun would almost be about 70 to 75 or sometimes even 80 degrees too, based on which you could control the height of the sun. You could manually do using this, or you could precisely type in the angle of rotation and vertical angle too. So these are all the important environmental settings which you could use in your real-time rendering. And apart from your environmental setting, the second important setting here is your camera setting. As the name suggests, this talks about different settings associated with your camera. In that, first thing will be your FOV, which is nothing but your field of view, using which you can control how narrow or how wide your camera view is. Can you see here? My personal recommendation is always go for standard, which is 60 degree. Or if you want to make it narrow, you can make it. The lowest you could go for here is 30 degree, which is completely fine. But if you're planning to go for a wide angle shot, then my personal recommendation is maximum go for 70, or in some rare occasions you might go for 75. But please don't exceed beyond 75. That is because increasing the FOV might visually distort the components. Can you see here? It looks like as if the side components are being stretched. This is a common phenomenon you would encounter if you increase the FOV even in your actual photograph. So it is better that you maintain it at standard, which is 60 degree. If not, you can go maximum about 75. And apart from your FOV, another important camera setting here is your clipping. We would have already talked about the clipping in your day 1 of the foundation course, but just to give you an heads up here, clipping will help you to cut the model from behind your camera towards where you're focusing at. Right now we have a clipping of 100 mm, which is the minimum. But if you increase the clipping, you could notice that it is literally cutting your model towards where you're focusing, right? It looks like as if we are moving the sectional plane forward, right? This is what your clipping is, okay? And this clipping especially plays a very crucial role when you're setting up your viewport in a narrow space, something like a bathroom or a walk-in wardrobe. For example, here I've placed my camera in the walk-in wardrobe, and you can notice this walk-in wardrobe is a narrow space. As a result, I am not able to see the complete stretch of the wardrobe from bottom till top, right? If I want to do that, then the only option here is to move my camera behind. But if you notice, if I move it to a certain extent, the wall which is behind my camera is blocking my view. Can you see here? In these kinds of scenario, if you are looking for a perfect viewport addressing everything from bottom till ceiling, then your clipping is the only option. So for that, just place your camera behind the wall. Let the wall interrupt your view. And once that is done, try to sensitively increase the clipping. Can you see here? I've just increased it on a unit basis. Right now, can you see the wall which was interrupting my view got cut? Right? Now I can further move the camera behind. And now the wall is again cutting. No worries, I could just increase it on a micro layer. In some cases, using the slider might be drastic for the clipping. For that, you could use this arrow mark which is there in the numeric tab here. That way, you could increase the clipping on a unit basis. I could increase it to this extent, to a point where as long as the wall which was interrupting my view is cut, that is the sweet spot. Can you see here? Now, in the same narrow space, you could notice that I could see the wardrobe from skirting till your loft cabinet. So this is what your clipping would do. This will really help you if you want to set a viewport in a really tight or a narrow space. Apart from that, the third important camera setting here is your perspective correction. See, if you take any visually pleasing photograph online, you will notice one common phenomenon there. All those will be actually a 2-point perspective shots, okay? Because 2-point perspective naturally has a tendency to systemize the view. In those cases, if you would like to convert your 1-point to 2-point perspective, just toggle it on, your perspective correction will be done, and now it has converted to a 2-point perspective. You might not notice a major difference in this viewport, but if you're taking any top angle or down angle shot, you will notice it. So right now, can you see here? For this viewport, if I toggle on the perspective correction, can you see the difference here? Right? So this one is a single point perspective. We are making it into a 2-point perspective. So it is always better that to toggle on your perspective correction so that your verticals and horizontals will precisely be perpendicular to each other. And apart from your perspective correction, another important camera setting will be the height of the camera. Like I told, you could even use the camera, you could manually control it this way, or you could press Q and E in your keyboard to control the height of the camera. If you press Q, your camera will move above. If you press E, your camera will move below. Or if you want to precisely specify the height of the camera, you can even type the value here too. And when it comes to camera height, I would always recommend you to go for a natural human eye level, so that the user will be able to relate the perspective. In addition to that, the last important camera setting here is your depth of field, which is technically your portrait or bokeh mode in your phone, right? Where the object which is in focus will be clear and any object which is out of focus will be completely blurred, right? That is what this depth of field is. Right now in this viewport, you will notice the objects which are near my camera, that is this alcohol bottle, the island counter, the fruits, everything is in focus. And the objects which are away from my camera, the countertop, the props which are placed on top of the countertop, the stove, even those components are in focus, right? Including your backsplash. So that is how it would generally look if the depth of field is toggled off. Everything in the view will be in focus. If you want to add a sense of professionalism to your viewports, I would recommend you to toggle on your depth of field. And once it is toggled on, you can notice that the object which is near my camera, it is in focus, and the object which is away from my camera, the backsplash, kitchen, countertop and props, all those are in out of focus. It is looking blurred, right? This is what your depth of field is. And once you toggle on your depth of field and control your focal point, all the object which is out of focus will be blurred, right? You could control the intensity of the blur using this fuzziness. If you increase the fuzziness, the blur will be extreme. Or if you decrease the fuzziness, the blur will be minimal. My personal recommendation for your depth of field fuzziness is anywhere between 7 to 15. In my case here, let me just go for 7 unit, based on which the intensity of the blur will be controlled. And once you edited all these camera settings, then you can save your viewport here. Can you see? You have user views, under which you have something called save angle, right? Shortcut is Ctrl D, using which you can save your viewports. And the viewport that is being saved will have all the camera data informations. Okay, so it is better that you just set the camera setting for it and then place your camera, position it accordingly and save the viewport. And once the viewport is saved, if you want to shift between the viewport, you can directly click it and the camera will precisely move to that viewport. Can you see here? Or if you already saved the viewport in the main rendering window, it would automatically be updated here. You can directly select it and position your camera accordingly as well. So this is what when it comes to your second render settings, which is your camera setting. The third render setting here is your effect setting. This talks about the post-production effects. Yes, in your real-time rendering window, you have settings that could even control your post-production values. In this of all the effect settings, just focus on the settings which we're addressing now. Okay, thus the first important setting here is the exposure. This talks about the exposure of the scene. So in some cases, you might notice where that entire space might be dark despite adding an ambient lighting, despite increasing the ambient brightness. In those kinds of scenario, then adjusting the exposure will become your only option to increase the brightness of the space. But remember, increasing the exposure comes with the noise issue as well. So the exposure here needs to be sensitively increased, not drastically, because as you increase the exposure, the noise will also be imparted in your renders. And apart from your exposure setting, the next important setting will be your light ambient blocking, which is your AO, ambient occlusion. So make sure that this is always toggled on and let the size of the AO be set anywhere between 0.5 to 0.6 and the radius of it can be set anywhere between 40 to 50 mm for your daytime render. And apart from this, another important effect setting is your color enhancement tag. In this, you already have 4 different presets here, right? Your primary, standard, contrast and gorgeous. In this, I would always recommend you to select either standard or contrast. If you've gone for a gorgeous preset, then all your colors will be oversaturated. If you've gone in for primary preset, then all your colors will be desaturated. We don't want both the extremes, so it is better that you either go for standard or contrast depending on your preference. And regardless of your color enhancement setting, please set the dazzling anywhere between 4 to 6 units for your daytime render. And in addition to this, at the last year under your advanced settings, you will see 3 options here. In this, make sure that you always toggle your specular reflection and your render complex material. So if you're taking any real-time render for your prospects, or if you like to share a render within your organization, then you don't have to toggle your specular reflection or render complex material. But if you're taking a final render for your design, I would recommend you to always toggle this on. By toggling it on, here they might have mentioned that the rendering time might increase about 3 minutes, but on a practical scale, it would just be increased anywhere between 10 to 20 seconds. But the 10 to 20 seconds, it's really worth for your final renders. And once all these 3 settings, that is your environment, camera and FX settings are done, then you can just click on this 3-dot menu in your render tab, select your preferred aspect ratio, the resolution, and you can directly take the render within your real-time rendering window itself. All the editing, environment, lighting, settings, everything will precisely be updated in your render. And once that is done, then you can just save this real-time rendering template, so that all the editing what we did here will be saved in this template. And you can just click on this X mark so that you could exit your real-time rendering window and go to your main rendering window. So this is what when it comes to your real-time rendering and its settings up. So with this, your section 3 of the Day 5 professional course is completed.